Good afternoon, everyone. Let me know if I'm audible. Can anyone confirm?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So let's start our today's discussion on DNS, a domain name system. Most of these slides are, I would say, 50% slides are from the authors. So, as acknowledgement to the authors, there are the few good resources, and those who want to study, I would strongly recommend you to go through those. First two are the RFCs, that indicate request for comment, or the DNS standard as it was defined way back in 1982. Then how to update DNS if your IP address changes. There's a dynamic DNS protocol under RFC, so you may skip, but you should read 1034 and 35. Then there are some other preparations, good resources I have given you. Daniel Missler or Icon, there's a slides, there's a normal website, basics of DNS. You'll probably understand it much better reading it here, even compared to textbook. And the Mocha Petris was the author of the inventor of the DNS. You'll probably find the paper by Mocha Petris. I had not verified the link, but it was working before. If not, I can send you the paper, those who are interested in. So let's just start. What really DNS is, what does it give us, how do we use it. When we use our computer system, we are the end user as a human being, and humans are generally good at names and poor at numbers. If you were to call your friend with their Aadhaar card number, or their voter ID number, or your USN number, you probably won't even remember more than one or two. But if you call your classmate by name, you probably remember half the class or more than that. So humans are very good with numbers. Sorry, humans are very good with names, but they are very poor with numbers. Whereas internet host machines, they are a lot more efficient when they deal with numbers or fixed format structure. So how do we map the two? As an end user, you like to use the names like google.com or yahoo.com or ksit.edu.in, whereas machines would like to communicate using an IP address. So we need something that connects the two, or given the name, gives us a respective IP address which a machine can use. And that is the primary job of DNS, called domain name system. There is a protocol, you invoke it, given the name, you find the IP address, it tells you that. On a Unix machine, you'll find a file called etc DNS resolver and other stuff. So what DNS is, it is a single server, single protocol, it is a distributed database for efficiency, scaling, management perspective. DNS is implemented as a distributed database. Like other internet protocols, HTTP you studied, will study, FTP, SMTP, even P2P. These are all application layer protocols, and same is true for DNS. DNS generally uses UDP, but it can also run on TCP. Since it is more of a query response, I send a request, get a response. So generally works on a UDP, but can also work, and at least when you have primary DNS server and secondary server which maintain the hot backup of data. Those people use TCP in any case. Good part about internet applications are that all these internet applications are deployed at the edge, as meaning at the end systems or at the end machines. The intermediate routers that connect your laptop to the Google server, all the intermediate routers, they only deal with IP and they are not aware of any kind of application being run. Since no change is needed to be made in the intermediate nodes in the internet, so all the deployment requires is on the server side and with the client side and you are done. So it gets to very fast deployment compared to telephony network where if we were to launch a new service, you have to modify each and every telephone exchange in the picture and that may take huge amount of time. Whereas launching internet service, once the application is ready, is a matter of minutes and not even hours, whereas your service could be up and running. So in DNS, complexity is at the edge, not in the core, and that's why deployment becomes a lot more easier. So how does DNS work? Can it be centralized? Can it be a single system? Which does all the work? So if you have a single system, the primary drawbacks of the single system are it is a single point of failure. And that means if the one system which you are deploying goes down, whole service is down. And that's the one of the biggest drawback of having a centralized system. Secondly, even assuming you are done robusticated, you keep a hot standby, but if it's a single system and all the traffic from all across the world come to this, the traffic volume to be processed by the system would be way too high, and certainly you'll have scaling up issues. Not even that, one system would be in one place, could be in US, India, any other country. But for all the other remaining countries, the distance from that laptop place to the particular single server would be too far away. And again, user won't get a desired response. So that also plays a role. Today's internet, we keep getting new sites, mapping to new names. Maybe hundreds of thousands of new sites come up, something go away. So how do we update? If you update once in a day, that means people won't get the access. They want to remove something. So on the fly doable is going to be very, very unrealistic if you are central single system server. And hence that is the reason DNS is implemented as decentralized distributed architecture is across, and we look at how does DNS really work. Given that DNS is distributed system, what are the services it offers? We said requirement was given the host name, DNS would give us the IP address. This works for the browser, but we also need to know what is my default gateway. It need not be the one gateway which is given the IP address running a DHCP server. Default gateway could be something else. So what DNS need to do is when you resolve the names, you need to look at what are the services DNS can offer you. So one is the IP address part. A host name could have multiple names. For example, IBM.com could have relay.1.ibm.com or relay.1.ibm.com. So these are called host aliasing and canonical names. When you browse a website, let's say a college website, ksit.edu.in, versus when you send me an email at rprostagi@ksit.edu.in, the two are served by two different servers. Browsing is by the mail server, mail goes to mail server, even though the domain ksit.edu.in remains the same. But for web browsing, you need the web server IP address. For sending a mail, you would need a mail server IP address. So DNS should be able to tell you, it should be able to ask DNS, give me the simple mapping or give me the mail server IP address. So with what is called MX record type. It is also used for load distribution. That's for scaling purposes. You develop a web application and it deployed on 10 different servers. You configure DNS such a way that every request it keeps giving a new IP address on 10 servers. So request one will get first IP address, second will get second IP address, and 11th one will get the first IP address again. Because DNS is giving you different IP address, so user request will go to different web servers, and in that way you are automatically doing a load balancing, and that's the way load balancing would basically work. So in the very crude form of load balancing, but early stages, DNS was, and even today, DNS is used for load balancing. One key difference between DNS and other internet application is DNS is one service which as a user you do not use directly. Like in the browser we type http:/google.com. But when you type, the browser invokes DNS service to find the IP address of google.com. So browser on our behalf finds, but as a user we rarely use it. We use HTTP protocol, we use FTP, we use SMTP as a user directly, but DNS we don't use. It is the application which we are using that internally makes use of DNS service, and in that sense it is different from other the application services. We said that DNS is a distributed hierarchical system. So at the top, we have root DNS servers. That means the top hierarchy starts from there, which is called dot. And then initially we had about 6 entities, domains, .com, .edu, .net, .org, .mil, and I think there is a one more I probably don't remember now. Later on, these were extended to even country names like .in, .uk, .jp for Japan. So these are called top level domain servers. So at the root, you have root DNS servers. Then below it, you have a top level domain name servers. Top level mean like .com server or .org, .edu. Now within .com for company, different company would have their own servers like yahoo.com or amazon.com or google.com. Similarly, for ORG, there will be some site like pbs.org, PBS stands for Public Broadcasting Service, or even for EDU, let's say Berkeley.edu, Stanford.edu, MIT.edu. In India, we always use in a country other than US, we always have country name and followed by edu. Or some people still use ac.in or edu.in, depends on individual taste. But these are the what is called. So when I were to look at domain name server of ksite.edu.in, that is domain server for ksite. Now, how does it really work? Let's say client want to get IP address of amazon.com. So what client will do is contact the root level server. Root level server will figure out where this amazon.com is. It will somehow contact, get information for .com server, which in turn will get information from amazon.com server. And once this information is available, this information is passed on to the actual client. As we look in shortly, there are two ways to find it. One is called iterative way, other is called recursive way. And we look at both of them at a time in a short while. If you want to look at top level domain servers diagram, you can look at those, search for it. Now, how big a host name could be? Let's say www.google.com. Now, there are two parts. One is the label, like www or Google or com, and one is the full website name, www.google.com. So, Internet imposes a limit of 1024 for the complete host name, and it implements a limit of 53 character for each of the domain being used. And this information is crucial. But each label like Google or KSIT, how long can the label be? So each label can be 63 characters or less, but maximum label can be 63 characters. And people have been kind of inventive. So we look at the site, the longest list of the longest stuff at the longest domain name at the long last. From starting this T to the long last T, there are exactly 63 characters. So you can look at those. The longest website name is one of the village names in UK. I can't even pronounce it. It's a single word, and that but total website name can be only 255 characters. So individual label 63 characters, total website name 255 characters, and you will not find the name. In DNS perspective, whether the host name is in capital letters or host name is small case letters, it does not really matter. It will still give you same IP address. For a user login account, your case sensitiveness matters, but for DNS purposes, it doesn't really matter. You can keep DNS server in a small case, or you can keep etc file in a uppercase. Both would work equally fine. Resolving DNS, we have two kind of names called fully qualified domain name service and partially qualified domain name service. By default, we keep using partial qualified because in the browser we just type Google or google.com and it automatically figures out should we try www.google.com or google.com. We just type Google. So we give a partial name and the application internally try to add suffix. But we want to be sure that you really want to go to that site and nowhere else. When I type Google, it should go to google.com and not google.ksite.edu.in. As a IT admin, I can say use suffix as ksite.edu.in. So when you type Google, it will go to google.ksite.edu.in. It will be bad in taste, people don't do it, but in theory it can be done. So if you want to be sure, always specify a dot at the end. Say google.com dot. When you put a dot at the end, it is called fully qualified domain name. If you don't put the dot at the end, it is called partially qualified domain name. Any questions, please? As a general practice, we are not used to typing dot. We know nobody plays a mischief, but be aware of it, that can happen. Especially in public place, do type the full domain name or what is called fully qualified domain name. At the top level, some names are reserved like .localhost, .com, .example, .invalid, and even some subdomains like example.net, example.com, example.org. These are reserved with fixed IP addresses. These are basically used for documentation purposes, but real life you will not find those servers. So the way we said that DNS works, a client would contact the root domain name server, and root domain name server, if it doesn't have the information, unlikely it will have. It will have information only about top level domain name servers like .com or .org or .edu. So it finds out the information authoritative name server. So let's say we want to find out the IP address for ksite.edu.in. If there's nothing else, we'll first go to root server. Root server will find out .in. .in will find out edu.in. Then there's the authoritative name server ksite.edu.in, and that our own name server would give us the IP address. And that's the way process works. Now this could work in two ways. One is called iterative way, other is called recursive way. For those of you who are a heavy user of a particular site, and if internet is flaky, so you don't know whether internet is down or your DNS server is down. So to make sure that happens, you can probably create a file on a system. On the Linux machine or Mac machine, you can create a file called /etc host. Or on Windows system, you can create a file Windows system 32 drivers etc host. You can make an entry in this file, and when you make an entry in this file, then DNS would not look at anywhere else. Simply pick up the entry from the file And those who want to look at, I'll show you how does this file look like. So you have an IP address and the name. Remember, these are my own servers, my.com, my private IP address. So it never gets resolved to DNS server because DNS, there's no DNS server for this. I'll put my local IP address. So whatever is, if the way DNS works, whatever put into this file, etc host, it first looks in there. If it does not find it, only then it goes to actual DNS server to figure out the actual IP address. So map indicates 13D root servers. 6 of them are in the US, then in Japan, Europe, possibly in Singapore, and that's how it is. They're mostly for information purposes. You should be aware. Now, after the root level servers, we have top level servers, which are called top level domains, like we said for .com, .org, .net, .edu, and so on and so forth. Further below, you have authoritative servers for a specific company, like google.com, yahoo.com, or even arboristicky.com, or you have this ksid.edu.in, kssem.edu.in. So these are called the top level domains for .com, and the companies, individual ones, or in the country names. And depending on the vendor, there are different people who maintain those. Like for .com, it is the network solutions. For edu, educast. For country, maybe specific country stuff. And those who want to look at what the all domain names are, I can suggest you to go through this link, which is IANA. IANA stands for Internet Address and Numbering Assignment. So they are the authority who assigns all the names and numbers, and they maintain. So it will be good to go through and glance through what it is. The authoritative DNS server is which precisely tells you unquestionably absolutely correct information from the real server. So let's say ksit.edu.in, when they have their own server, which gives the DNS server, that will be authoritative server. Everybody else would be caching the entry, and when cache expires, the entry becomes invalid. So you may or may not depend upon the cache response. If you want real response, you should wait for the real answer. That's the way it should be. Now, typically the way you work, like you get in the broadband connectivity, you set up and you get a pamphlet from Airtel or BSNL or something. This is your gateway IP address, and this is your DNS server. So it is the ISP that maintains a DNS server and some connection communication with the DNS server, so that you can get precise authoritative information from the given host name to the IP address. So typically what happens, whenever you make a query, it always goes to local DNS server, and once local DNS server doesn't have the answer, it will contact the root level servers up the stream and then find the answer and then give you the answer. Let's look at IP address for different stuff. So looking at IP address for the user at poly.edu wants to communicate with gaia.cs.umass.edu. So this user at poly.edu want to know the IP address of gaia.cs.umass.edu. So how does the protocol work? This user 1, first contact the DNS server, which we are connected. Now local DNS server, probably by ISP, or even could be by organization. It doesn't have it, then it will contact the root level DNS server. When it contacts root level DNS server doesn't have it, and it will redirect it back to the local DNS server saying, I don't have it, but please contact .edu top level domain name server. So contact top level DNS server, this again says, I have information only for edu, but subdomain like umass.edu, I'll give you the IP address of DNS server for umass.edu, please contact that. So this also informs local DNS server, and then it makes a communication request to authoritative DNS server of cs.umars.edu, and it get the response. And once you get the response, it sends the response back. This is called iterative approach because you contact root DNS server, get a response, then you as a user contact all the server one at a time in sequence, and things are resolved. If, however, you look at some other people who basically have the what is called the recursive approach or even local DNS server, so like in a college, you talk to ISP and ISP to local DNS server. If your internet is from Hathaway or let's say BSNL or whatever, they will give you a DNS server. So you always contact that, and it is the responsibility of the DNS server to talk in turn to root level, top level, authoritative, and get the information. Because this local DNS server interacts with all of them, that's why it's called iterative, iterates over one at a time. Alternatively, we also have what is called recursive approach. As before, the requesting host contacts local DNS server. Local DNS server would contact the top level server. Now, root level server does not say please contact .com server or .edu. Root level server would directly contact top level DNS server. Now, it doesn't have the information. It will contact the umars.edu authoritative server, get the response, pass it back, and then user will get it. So the recursive way, because you make only one request, and to whom you made a request, they'll make other request, and that will get a response. Now this is certainly will cause more load on the root and top level server, because if all the user requests come to root level or top level dominant server, they will be flooded, overwhelmed. So in general, internet-based DNS servers, they use iterative approach, not recursive approach, but approach can certainly be used. And you can hit DNS request when you make, you can specify whether you want recursive approach or DNS approach. If I'm accessing google.com, let's say 10 times for searching, do I need to find the IP address every time? Answer is generally no. Because once I get the IP address, I'll cache this information into my memory. And as long as my cache is valid, which is valid for few minutes to few hours, I don't have to make a new DNS request. And this is given by what is called time to live, or TTL value. For each time you get a response, it tells you how long this entry is valid for, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and you cache it, and during this time, you never ever make a DNS request again. If let's say google.com DNS query time is 3 hours, so within 3 hours, next time at google.com, there will not be a Google DNS request from your machine. And that's the way it works. However, when your cache becomes out of date, it says 3 hours, but somehow let's say Google has changed the DNS IP addresses, then as a user you won't know, you will get a poor performance. So one has to be careful when things don't work. Sometimes it may happen, like you go to the college lab, type yahoo.com, it times out, you don't get a response. That is because you access local DNS server contacting root and top level domain server, and by the time it gets response, you timed out. But since local DNS server got the response with TTL values, it keeps in the cache, and when next user access same yahoo.com, local DNS server gives response from its memory or cache and serve immediately. So user one may think internet is down, user to say everything is up. Fault is it was DNS that timed out, that made user one believe internet is down. In fact, when people want to attack a website, they rarely attack a website, but they always attack the DNS server, because if DNS server goes down, nobody will get the IP address, and that is effectively bringing down a particular machine. So you can look at those mechanisms, different RFCs. So how does my protocol work? How does my DNS record look like? DNS follows what is called a format of resource record format. There are 4 fields. One is name, what the name you're trying to use, value, whether IP address, or canonical name or MX name or whatever, type what kind of query you made, whether you want IP address 4, IP address 6, mail server address, canonical name, name server and so, and TTL is time to delay. So I'll give you example. Type A is IPv4, IPv6, which we'll study in our module 3, is 128 byte and 128 bits or 16 bytes, where IPv4 address we use of 4 bytes. 4 into 4 is 16. So typically IPv4 is given type is equal to AAAA, quad is called. Similarly, if you want to know which is the authoritative DNS server for any company, you can give a type as NS. It will tell you what is the authoritative name server for the particular product. Then you have a canonical name. What are the other alternative names? Like IBM.com is also named as server. This server is.backup2.ibm.com, both refer to same name. So these are called canonical names. And if you want to get mail server information, you specify a type called MX. So let me try to give an example there. When I say this, let's say dig is a tool which can use to give DNS information. So I can say -t a, let's say google.com. So it tells you google.com IP address is 216 dot whatever it is. If I want to find IPv6 address, I would say type AAAA and see you got IPv6 address for google.com. Similarly, if you were to type IPv6 for Yahoo, you'll get IPv6 address for yahoo.com and see the number of. Now, if you want to look at mail server for, let's say, let's look at IPv6 address for KSIT. So this is the IP address of our website, but want to look at mail server when you send a mail, so type MX. You see our thing hosted by Google. So all our domain email is hosted by Google, but whereas our web server is privately hosted by somewhere else. So let's look at where it is hosted. We'll look at our name server. And then you got name server domain control. So that is where our name server is registered with our this thing, and that is where we get our information. If you want to get all information in one go, you can say T is equal to any, and it will give you all the information in one go. So you get IP address, your name server, startup authority from where your authority server is, mail server records, tax information for validation purposes, and so on, so forth. So I suggest you play with it, understand it, you probably know better. The way the protocol works, you make a DNS query and you get a reply message. There are fixed header fields, which are basically 12 bytes. So first 2 bytes are identification, because you can make a different query and get a different response. So you need to match your response you got a reply to the query, and that is where the identification field is used in the header. Now there are flags that indicates whether it is a query message or a reply message, or you would like to have recursive approach, or you would like to have iterative approach, or you want to know is recursion available so that I can try recursive approach, or if the reply you're getting is from a cache server, for example, local DNS server, or you are getting it from authoritative server, those indicates flag. Then you have a number of questions, 2 byte. Typically, you have only one question, but there could be more. And then for a given question, how many answers? Like we saw that we have 4 MX records, 2 name server records. So it's the total number of answer records. And if the authoritative name servers numbers, and for each of these, you have records that many questions, number of answers, and so on and so forth. You can use Wireshark to see things up, and you probably know. So let me see if I can launch a Wireshark. The launch words are doesn't look like. Oh yeah. No, this is not the words are. So I can put a filter, say port 53. There the DNS works. Capture this and start. Start my capture. Now I make a request. So you see, this is the request we are basically making. You have only one question and all other things are zero. And this is the query. And we are asking type any for the hostname case.edu.in and you basically get a response from here. So you get 13 answer records. And if you look at the detailed answers, one type A, two name servers, one startup authority, 5 mail server record. You can expand this and get all the details. And it says it tells you time to live 3599. That basically means 59 minutes or 1 hour. And depending on record, you get so that you can cache for that much time. So I would suggest you to use Wireshark, play with it, look at the records and see how the DNS work. Make different queries, look at any website name to your DNS server and understand how the DNS work. The format is the same. Only thing flag will tell you whether it is a query or whether it is a reply. In query, you will only one questions, other fields would be zero. In reply, question would be repeated, and depending on the answers, there could be the 13 answers. You will see 13 such objects, which is type, name, value, and TTL value pairs. You'll find that many records, and that's the way it basically works. And if you are getting a reply from authoritative name server, you have separate record for those, and any other information you'll get those. So that's how the DNS protocol works. So you make a request, as we saw here. So we made a query, this is a response. So there are different sites, you make a query, you get a response. So analyze, make sure put a capture filter of 50.53, you get all the messages. So this tells you actually format. As we said, if you look at the header, this is transaction ID, which is 2 bytes, flags, it says it is a response message, it's a recursion desired. But if you look at query, this says recursion desired, and flag is, so this is not a response message because response bit is set to 0. That means a query message and so on and so forth. And that's the way you should be looking at, understand. When you explore it, you'll probably know better. I'd recommend you to do that. I already made a query. I can send you this DNS query file, which I captured 2 days ago on about 20th, and I can send you and open in Wireshark and see those details. Now, this is only for DNS protocol, but how do you insert record into a DNS server? Let's say I want to register a company. You go to a registrar like GoDaddy.in or VeriSign.in or whatever and pay the money, get the domain registered. In fact, there is a service you can go to the site called whois.net, and if you provide the any domain name, they'll try to give information about that website. I think it is probably not working. I need to look at.
Sir, in
Yeah.
terminal also we can give this command now, sir, who is.
Maybe I don't know whether the terminal who is command works or not. Maybe I don't know. I need to try it out. Okay, it works. Yeah, you can try that out. Absolutely. Thank you. It will probably resolve your and you see all that information there, yeah. So you can find it out. You know where the domain ID is, who the registered, and all kind of things. You can figure it out. Now, when you want to bring down a site, it is much easier to attack authoritative name server than actual website. Because DNS is probably one of the weakest entity. Not too many people take that much precaution to make it strong. And if DNS server is down, none of the query would be resolved, and none of the query would be resolved. It is as good as practically internet is down. So in fact, attackers all the time trying to attack the DNS server rather than the main website because it's easy target to do. And once it's attacked, you probably believe internet is down. So attackers never been fully successful, but whenever they try, the first target of attack is DNS server. That is much easier to bring it down rather than anything else. If you can bombard the top level server or bombard our, let's say, domaincontrol.com, then ksit.edu practically will be down because people won't be able to access. There are other kind of attacks, redirect attacks. You could be man in the middle. You can capture the request from some user and give your own reply, and user won't know whether it's getting a right or wrong authoritative. That's why it got into called DNSSEC. But at the core level, DNS is insecure and it can be spoofed up. Doesn't really happen, but in theory it can happen. You can also do DNS poisoning. You can probably insert invalid records, put a DNS server, do that part, and that also typically would work. Sometimes you attack other way out. You make a different queries and give a source IP address of, let's say, ksit.edu.in. So from different places through bots, you make a DNS request and reply will come to KSIT, and the long reply. When you get too many long reply, the traffic would be bombarded and link would be choked, and practically site would be down. So the different way of attacking it, you have to be aware of how attacks are happened. We deal with security, we'll probably look at part of these attacks, how do they work. But typically attacking a website, it is a lot more target is the DNS server rather than the actual website. And that's the way DNS works. So that brings to the end of the DNS lecture. If any questions, please feel free. From next lecture, we'll go into file transfer protocol and SMTP protocol. Those are not really being used in daily life, so we'll probably give you a little bit, but not too much in detail, whereas they are used almost daily basis. So analyze it, read it, and study it, you'll know better. I am done. Any questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, we can bring it down. You can also send me a question on email, and I'll be able to answer it depending on. So far, I'm not seeing any interaction from you guys. It become a monologue. I request you to please be interactive, ask questions. Maybe next time I'm going to ask you a little bit. If no questions, thank you. Let's disconnect. And next lecture, we'll look at FTP and SMTP protocols. Thank you.